forward by this government does not give adequate effect to its own commitment that NBN would operate on a wholesale-only basis. This is a very complex issue, Mr Deputy Speaker, but it is also an issue of the first importance in the policy bargain that is being put forward by this government. It is not, I might say, a policy bargain we agree with, but on their own terms, the bargain that they have put is this, that competition will be restricted, indeed effectively barred, in facilities-based competition by any network wishing to operate in competition with NBN Co. And in exchange for that unprecedented restriction on competition, the assurance that has been given by this government in policy terms is that this NBN Co, this enormously powerful entity, will only operate as a wholesaler. And the implementation study, Mr Deputy Speaker, noted the importance of this issue. I quote from page 28, "Defining wholesale only is simple in theory but complex in practice." And later on the same page, after discussing the possibility of a bank or another large corporate effectively being directly sold services by the NBN, the implementation study goes on to note, "The risk is that relaxing the wholesale definition in this or other similar ways could provide an opportunity for NBN Co to expand its scope beyond what was originally intended by government." That is a very sage warning provided by the authors of the implementation study, who received $25 million from this government for the provision of that advice. The point they were highlighting is that the regulatory scheme this government has put forward, if it is to be delivered upon, depends upon the most rigorous restrictions on the capacity of NBN Co to sell only in the wholesale market. If there is any doubt that NBN Co also has the capacity to compete in the retail market, then what this government is putting forward is a very bad bargain indeed. And it is because of our fear that a very bad bargain is being put forward that we have moved this amendment, Mr Deputy Speaker. Our fears as to the scope creep or the mission creep that NBN Co is likely to engage in were enhanced when we saw the broad range of utilities which NBN Co is to be permitted to sell to directly. And those include transport authorities, electricity supply bodies, gas supply bodies, water supply bodies, sewerage service bodies, stormwater drainage service bodies, state or territory road authorities. I can't understand, Mr Deputy Speaker, why they didn't include the Dust Diseases Tribunal in that, and all manner of other bodies, because it's very hard to draw any intellectually coherent basis for this range of categories of organisations which are to be permitted to be sold services directly in clear violation of the stated policy principle which this government articulated when it first announced its policy in relation to the national broadband network. So as we look at this legislation, we do not think, if this government is genuine about delivering on its policy commitments, we do not think it is sufficient to rely upon the mechanism which is contained in the bill as it was put to this House, and that mechanism is that there is a restriction on selling to anybody who is not a carrier or a carriage service provider. We say that mechanism may have been appropriate under the 1997 legislation, but it is not appropriate now when it is being pursued in the context of dramatic restrictions on competition, barriers to any player wanting to come into the market to compete with NBN Company. That, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the vital new element, which is why it is not sufficient to rely upon this restriction that NBN Co is only permitted to sell to a carrier or a carriage service provider. Additional safeguards are required if this government's policy commitments are to be delivered on. That is why we move this amendment.
Order. The Question is that the amendments 1 and 2, as moved by the member for Wentworth, be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Ayes have it. Noes have it? I hear one no. Ayes? No, the noes have it. Division required? Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
Yeah, it's a great phone.
Where's the speaker?
Lock the doors. The question is that the amendments 1 and 2 made by the member for Wentworth be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Barker and Parkes tellers for the ayes, and the members for Fowler and Shortland tell us for the noes.
Oh, no, 66.
Oh, jeez. Order. The result of the division is ayes 63, noes 66. The question is therefore negatived. Members should be either resuming their places or leaving the chamber at this stage. In both cases, they should do so quickly and quietly. Order. Order. The member for Fadden. Members could please resume their places. The member for Wentworth has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move now to move Amendment 3, which is in my name in respect to this bill. Now, the purpose of this amendment is to make the NBN genuinely subject to the Freedom of Information Act. The government very skillfully was able to persuade the Greens in the previous debate in the House and indeed in the Senate to accept an FOI amendment to this to apply to the NBN, which says that the NBN is subject to the Freedom of Information Act, but that documents which relate to its commercial activities are exempt. Well, of course, given that it doesn't have any activities which are not commercial, it means, all other things being equal, the entirety of its documentary material is exempt. Now, this is a monopoly. It is a government-owned monopoly. It represents the largest investment in any one infrastructure project in our country's history, and it should be properly scrutinised. One of the many paradoxes, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, is that the companies, the entities that are least open to public scrutiny are those that belong to the government. A private company, Telstra, Singtel, for example, a public company, I should say, that's listed on the stock market, has to publish information, any material information that is price sensitive. It's got an obligation of continuous disclosure. It's being scrutinised by dozens of brokers, analysts, and of course it has thousands, if not more, shareholders with an interest in it. Government corporations suffer from the tragedy of the commons because they belong to everybody. No individuals have a strong enough interest to follow them. Now, that is why it is so important that freedom of information provisions apply, so important that there is proper parliamentary scrutiny. If this amendment is accepted, the NBN will be subject to the Act. It will still have the benefit of the exemptions in the Act. In sections 40, this is the Freedom of Information Act, sections 45, 46 and 47. Information received in confidence can be exempt. Information which relates to trade secrets can be exempt. Information, commercial information, the disclosure of which would destroy the value of that information is exempt, and of course documents relating that are subject to legal professional privilege are exempt. So the Greens and the crossbenchers, sadly, were, well, not all of them, but a number of them, were taken for a ride with that Clayton's amendment in the previous debate. This is an opportunity to subject the NBN to full and proper scrutiny. Now, it will be said, I can sense that the member for Greenway is keen to say this, to say that the government's amendment is comparable to the provisions that apply to Australia Post. That is simply not correct. The provisions that apply to Australia Post only exempt from production documents which relate to its commercial activities where it is in competition with other companies, other businesses. And of course, for the bulk of Australia Post's operations, it's a monopoly and of course a utility. The NBN will not be in competition with anybody in terms of its fundamental purpose of providing the monopoly fixed line operation, and that of course is why they tweaked the provisions, that language that have been used for Australia Post. But the consequence is that because documents relating to its commercial activities are exempt, as it doesn't have any charitable or philanthropic activities that I'm aware of, all of its documents would be subject to disclosure. And for that reason, we need to have a thorough application of the FOI Act to the NBN, and this amendment, very brief, very straightforward, would do just that.
Order. Call the Leader of Government Business in the House.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. It really is a bit rich for this opposition to come into this place talking about openness and transparency. I mean, this is the party that watered down freedom of information laws at every opportunity, introduced more exemptions to the FOI Act, blocked access to documents by issuing conclusive certificates, and generally embraced a culture of secrecy during its 12 years in government. Indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker, one article from news.com.au, Garrett's $12,000 FOI bid blocked, makes interesting reading. It says this: Federal Opposition Environment spokesman Peter Garrett has failed with an FOI application after being told the information would assist his election campaign. On 18th of October, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority knocked back Mr Garrett's Freedom of Information request for documents on the effect of global warming on the reef and refused to waive an administration charge of more than $12,000. It says the request for the $12,718.80 charge to be waived was dismissed as it would not cause financial hardship to the applicant. Part of the $12,718.80 costs included charges for 107.6 hours of search and retrieval time, 539 hours of decision-making time, and photocopying of more than 3,250 pages at 10 cents per page. As Mr Garrett said at the time, here we are trying to find information from scientific reports about the reef and they're blocking us. Who was the Environment Minister at the time who was blocking the FOI request about climate change and its impact on the reef? The member for Wentworth. The member for Wentworth. This is just absurd, the hypocrisy here. The government doesn't support this amendment. The government is committed to a high level of transparency and accountability regarding NBN Co activity. The establishment of a joint committee on the rollout of NBN with very wide terms of reference and a balanced membership demonstrates the government's commitment to openness and transparency for the NBN. The government supported the amendment to the NBN Access Bill in the House of Representatives to add NBN Co as a prescribed authority under the FOI Act with an exemption for documents in relation to its commercial activities. NBN Co is able to demonstrate that a wide range of information is likely to be accessible under the proposed FOI amendments agreed in the House. To provide additional certainty, the government supported further amendment in the Senate to establish a statutory review of NBN Co's FOI arrangements within 12 months of its commencement, based on the current FOI amendments originally passed in the House of Representatives. The FOI Minister will be responsible for initiating the review and will provide a report for tabling in both Houses of Parliament. This review will assist to ensure that the amendments negotiated for NBN Co have achieved the correct balance in practice between the pro-disclosure requirements of the FOI Act and the protection of commercially sensitive information NBN Co may hold. It is necessary to understand that the amendments already agreed in respect of NBN Co's FOI decisions regarding the commercial activities exemption will take account of current dealings they may have with third parties, as well as enabling NBN Co to take into account any dealings which may arise in the foreseeable future. Given the importance of the NBN and its operating according to the principles the government has set out for it, it is sensible to review these provisions to ensure that they are operating efficiently and effectively. The fact is that the NBN Co would face significant risks if subject to the FOI Act in full as proposed by this amendment. Commonwealth companies like NBN Co are set up to undertake commercial activities. NBN Co could be placed at a commercial disadvantage in relation to its network design, construction and rollout activities if it was subject to the FOI Act in full. When NBN Co is included in the FOI Act, it will be in a unique position as the only Commonwealth company which is also a GBE within the FOI Act. Aboriginal Hostels Limited is a company included in the Act, but is not a GBE. This amendment would impose unforeseen and possibly very high administrative burdens and compliance costs on NBN Co. I urge the House to reject this amendment.
Order. The question is, I call that the amendment number 3 is moved by the member for Wentworth be agreed to. I call the member for Lyne.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'll be brief only to say I do support this amendment, as I have in a previous form, in a previous piece of legislation. I do support the concept of scrutiny and oversight, and I do think this assists in achieving that. I would also hope if the mover of this amendment is serious about those same principles of scrutiny and oversight, he will get his political party to change their position on the Auditor-General's Amendment Bill, which is a private member's bill that has been brought forward to this chamber to allow for audits to be done of GBEs, including NBN Co. At the moment, the Coalition is opposing that and opposing the principles of scrutiny and oversight as a consequence. So if we're serious about this, if we are serious about NBN Co being able to be FOI'd and to have audits done, and for that culture of scrutiny and oversight of this Parliament on behalf of community being delivered, then I would ask for consistency in this amendment lining up with support for the Auditor-General's Amendment Bill that currently isn't the position of the Coalition.
Order. The question is that the amendment number 3 moved by the member for Wentworth be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. Think the ayes have it? Ayes have it? I hear one voice. Ayes have it? And is a division required? A division not required? No, a division required. No, I didn't hear the division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. He didn't. Turn your back on me.
Come on, Darryl. You're in favour of transparency. Come over this side now.
Anything you're in favour of, I'm against.
Since when?
You got 4?
The new position.
Very simple.
Very simple, making 4
Mate, you're a military man.
Lock the doors. The question is that Amendment 3, moved by the member for Wentworth, be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the members for Barker and Parkes tell us for the ayes, and the members for Fowler and Shortland tell us for the noes. Apologies to the member for Hinkler, but I have to interrupt him. The result of the division is ayes 64, noes 65. The question is therefore negatived. Would members please leave the chambers if they're doing so quickly, and those members that are remaining behind do so quietly whilst they resume their seats. Order. The following message has been received from the Senate. The Senate returns to the House of Representatives the bill for an act to amend legislation relating to telecommunications and for other purposes, and informs the House that the Senate has agreed to the bill with the amendments in the annex schedule. The Senate requests the concurrence of the House in the amendments. The Minister.
Mr Speaker, I move that the amendments be considered immediately.
Order. The question is that the amendments be considered immediately. All those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Division required, and ring the bells for 4 minutes. You good? Order. As the House awaits the 4 minutes to transpire, during the last division there were some members that were well and truly listening to one of the House's great raconteurs' stories, the member for Hinkler, but they had their backs to the tellers, and they shouldn't do that. But I understand that it was a special occasion for the House's great raconteur because it's his birthday today, and I'm pleased that the members of the House were able to gather here on the member for Hinkler's birthday. No. And the member for Maranoa will desist from encouraging him to give us the frog joke. Order. Lock the doors. The question is that the amendments be considered immediately. The ayes are passed to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Shortland and Fowler tellers for the ayes and the members for Barker and Parkes tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is aye 66, no 63. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. The Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to indicate to the House that the government proposes it may suit the convenience of the House to consider the amendments in the following two groups. The first group, numbers 5, 6, 8, 11, 12 and 14 through to 60. The second group, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10 and 13.
If there's no objection to that course of action, I will allow that course of action. The Minister.
I move that Senate amendments numbers 5, 6, 8, 11, 12 and 14 to 60 be agreed to. I intend to speak for a while, so you can off you go.
Well,
I understand.
I'd encourage members that are leaving to do so quietly and call on members that are staying to do so quietly
I
as well.
understand that those people who object to the time this is taken might object to the fact we just had a division on whether we'd have a debate or not, which took up another 10 minutes. But I would now like to make some comments in relation to the amendments to this bill. As drafted, the Access Bill amends the Competition and Consumer Act 2010 and the Telecommunications Act 1997 to introduce new access, transparency and non-discrimination obligations relating to the supply of wholesale services by NBN Co Limited. The bill also extends similar supply and open access obligations to owners of other superfast broadband networks. The Access Bill operates in conjunction with the accompanying Companies Bill that has just been carried by this House. The Senate agreed to a number of government amendments to the bill to better ensure NBN Co can achieve its historic mission of bringing superfast broadband to Australia and providing a more effective platform for retail competition. A number of government amendments of a technical nature were also made. I'll briefly explain the government's amendments in the Senate before commenting on some of the Senate's other amendments, and for the convenience of the House, I'll comment on both amendments that are being moved now and amendments that I'll move secondly. Most importantly, the Access Bill was amended to authorise certain specified conduct by NBN corporations required to implement the government's policy objectives of promoting the structural reform of the telecommunications and uniform national pricing on the NBN. The conduct will be authorised for the purposes of Section 51 of the Competition and Consumer Act, which has the effect of exempting conduct from the restrictive trade practices provisions of that Act. The authorisations permit NBN corporations to refuse to permit interconnection outside listed points of interconnection, to enable NBN Co to only offer certain services as a bundle and cross-subsidise in charging for services. These conducts are to be authorised to ensure NBN Co can achieve uniform national pricing, but are authorised only to the extent that it is reasonably necessary for it to do so to achieve that objective. This has been made particularly clear as through amendments to the authorisation provisions moved by Senator Ludlam and Senator Xenophon. Under the amendments, the ACCC will not be able to require NBN Co to offer prices that are not uniform nationwide, but it can otherwise reset the terms and conditions of NBN Co's services. NBN Co conduct outside this narrow authorisation remains fully subject to ACCC scrutiny, just as its operation as a wholesale-only, open and equivalent basis is subject to close ACCC scrutiny. Changes are proposed to Part 11C of the Competition and Consumer Act to support the authorisations. The authorisation provisions are fundamentally linked to the government's policy of the NBN delivering nationally uniform wholesale pricing and the government's commitment to the regional independence on this count. NBN Co will be delivering a 12 megabits per second service to all Australians at the same wholesale price of $24, regardless of location or technology. This policy is explicit in the government's commitment to regional Australia of 7th of September 2010 to put in place a cross-subsidy to achieve uniform national wholesale pricing so that people in regional areas can pay the same price as people in the city. As that statement said, for the first time, wholesale broadband prices will be the same for households and businesses, regardless of where they are located. And part of what the National Broadband Network is about is overcoming the tyranny of distance that creates inequity depending upon where you live here in Australia. In the Statement of Expectations, the government further advised NBN Co that it will be able to cross-subsidise from its national revenue flows to provide national uniform pricing. This will enable NBN Co, for example, to use revenues from areas within the fibre footprint that can be served much more cost-effectively to those areas in the wireless footprint that are more expensive to service, with a view to providing uniform pricing. This is an arrangement further bolstered by the level playing field arrangements, which I will come to shortly.
The member's time has expired. The Minister.
By providing a wholesale-only platform with uniform national wholesale pricing, the government will further advance its objective of structural reform of the Australian telecommunications industry. And I want to indicate to the House that in the light of the debate in the Senate on the issue of uniform national pricing, and particularly the mischievous and misleading comments by coalition senators on that issue, the government will be providing additional guidance on this matter later today. The government understands that the authorisations have been included in the bill are important to both NBN Co and other carriers. The government has not proposed them lightly, but rather to ensure that NBN Co can deliver on the key objective of national uniform pricing, particularly for the benefit of consumers in regional, rural and remote Australia. And I want to pay tribute to the government members here, but also the members for Lyme, the members for New England, the member for Kennedy, the member for Denison, and indeed the member for O'Connor, even though he doesn't agree with the government on some of these issues, has ensured that he always stands up for regional Australia. And part of what we're about here is making sure that people like my good friend, the member for Kennedy, are kept happy. Because if the member for Kennedy is pleased about delivering in regional Australia, then there's no doubt that that means that that's a good outcome for regional Australia. However, in recognition of concerns about the authorisations, the government supported two key amendments in the Senate by Senators Xenophon and Ludlam. The bill requires the ACCC and NBN Co to agree to changes to the list of the points of interconnection NBN Co must offer. There needs to be agreement on this because the list impacts on how NBN Co builds and operates its network. First, the government has agreed that before 30 June 2013, there should be an independent review of the policies and procedures relating to the identification of listed points of interconnection. Second, the government has agreed that NBN Co's agreement to changes to the list of points of interconnection should no longer be required once the network is built and fully operational. The other important government amendments made to the Access Bill in the Senate were those relating to the level playing field arrangements. These did two particular things. First, these amendments clarify that the level playing field requirements in the proposed new Part 7 of the Telecommunications Act only apply to local access lines that are part of a telecommunications network that is wholly or principally used or proposed to be used to supply eligible services to residential or small business customers and is capable of supplying a superfast carriage service. The other major component of these amendments implements the government's policy announcement of 20th of December 2010, when it released NBN Co's corporate plan. Proposed Part 8 of the Telecommunications Act requires networks caught by the level playing field provisions to be wholesale only. Related to the amendments, the Access Bill was also amended by the Senate to expand the definition of a Layer 2 bitstream service to include either a Layer 2 Ethernet bitstream service or a Layer 2 bitstream service specified in a legislative instrument made by the Australian Communications and Media Authority. The amendment responded to concerns raised by the Internet Society of Australia and is designed to provide appropriate flexibility to accommodate possible technological change over time. The Senate also amended the bill to remove from it NBN Co's ability to engage in discrimination that could aid efficiency. The government considers that discrimination that aids efficiency is a well-established concept in economics and one that is already reflected in the access regimes in Part 3A and 11C of the Competition and Consumer Act. However, the government accepts the arguments of the Senate that in the case of NBN Co, which has been established to operate on a wholesale-only open and equivalent access basis, that such provisions may not necessarily be appropriate. The government agrees, however, with Senator Xenophon, who moved these amendments, that there may be a need for some greater flexibility in relation to product development. This is an issue that the government will look at further. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker,
Just keep going with the vote. The member's time has expired, the Minister.
The NBN Access Bill, together with the NBN Companies Bill, demonstrates the government's commitment to structural reform of the telecommunications market and to ensuring that the NBN meets the government's key objectives, that NBN Co Limited operate on a wholesale-only basis and offer open and equivalent access. This includes the key objective of providing equity to regional, rural and remote Australians through the delivery of uniform national wholesale pricing. By doing so, the NBN will provide a platform for vibrant retail-level competition that will bring better services to all Australians. And I commend the resolution and all of the amendments to the House.
The question is that the Senate amendments moved by the Minister be agreed to. I call the Senate amendments numbers 5, 6, 8, 11, 12 and 14 to 60. The question is the amendments moved by the Senators as moved by the Minister be agreed to. All of those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Minister.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. I now move that Senate amendments numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10 and 13 be agreed to. And in speaking to that, Madam Deputy Speaker, briefly, I addressed many of these amendments in my remarks to the earlier resolution in support of Senate amendments that were put. I understand that there'll be some amendments, an amendment moved to one of these provisions that the government certainly doesn't regard as being necessary, but I'll address that once it is moved. Apart from that, the government believes that it's very important that this piece of legislation be carried with the Senate amendments. The Senate gave these issues due consideration over 2 days of sittings last week. We previously had given due consideration to these issues as well, and the Parliament, of course, considered this legislation. I moved way back in last December, so it's been 3 months of important consideration of this legislation. After those 3 months, I think it is time that we get on with building the national broadband network. And I call upon the opposition. I know that the member for Wentworth probably is a reluctant recruit to this destroy the NBN campaign of the Leader of the Opposition, who hasn't bothered to stick around for this debate and for these votes, but he's ensuring that his backbench is being forced to endure what is essentially about the expression of the opposition's frustration once again. I commend the amendments to the House.
The question is that Senate amendments moved by the Minister be agreed to. I call the member for Cowper.
I move Senate Amendment number 2, circulated in my name. And Deputy Speaker,
So, the member for Cowper, I have to move these amendments first before I move to yours. So, sorry, the member for Cowper.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And this is a very important amendment as it enshrines uniform wholesale pricing across technologies. And it's vitally important that we not only have a uniform price geographically, but also that the price be uniform, not dependent, and the clock's already half run down too.
Can I get to my apologies there?
All right.
The member for Cowper has the call and he's allotted time.
And it's vital that the access to uniform. So I know you do. I know you do, Minister.
The
I know
Minister
that
will stop
you wait
interrupting so he can
eagerly
get
for my
through this.
contribution each time. But it's vital that we have uniform pricing, not only across the geographical areas, but also across all sorts of technologies, and that Australians who receive broadband via satellite or via wireless or by fibre should be paying the same unit price for a particular download speed, regardless of the method of delivery. And this is an important issue, because without that uniformity across technology, there would be a digital divide based on pricing. It's certainly important for the members or the constituents that the National Party represents, and the country members within the Liberal Party, that there be that uniformity across the delivery of technology. And there is a test in this, Deputy Speaker, for the country independence, because this is something that should be enshrined in legislation. It's vital that we not only depend just on a promise from this government to provide uniformity across technology, but that it be actually enshrined in legislation. We all heard the Prime Minister promise that there would be no carbon tax in a government that I lead. There would be no carbon tax. So, well, it is very relevant. It is very relevant because it's vital that this uniformity be actually enshrined in legislation, and not to depend on a promise from a government that has a track record of not keeping those promises. And that is vitally important. So will we see the country independents supporting this legislation? And I know that the member for Kennedy is keen to support this amendment. Will we see the independents supporting this, or will we see them roll over to the government yet again? That is the question that is before the House will be looking at tonight. So we're about to have a vote in this place where we will see whether the country independents are going to support this important principle of uniformity across technology, or whether they in fact roll over, because it is vital that we don't depend just on a promise. We're all assembled here in this House. We are legislators. It's important that this principle be enshrined, that it be dealt with by legislation right here, right now in the House, and not put off to a future time, not dependent on a letter or some other instrument. The appropriate instrument to define this is, in fact, I can't even hear your interjection, but the appropriate instrument to define this is in this. I won't get put. Is in this legislation, and we'll certainly be watching. We'll be certainly watching how the independents vote on this. We've seen them roll over on youth allowance for country kids. We've seen them roll over. We've seen them roll over on less administration for paid parental leave. We've seen them lump their constituents with a carbon tax. Now we're going to see if they insist on enshrining in legislation this very important principle, Deputy Speaker, of uniform...
You're all out of your chairs, by the way.
They are very, very disorderly, Deputy Speaker. You're
not helping the member for Cowper.
Because we need to take account not only of the technology that's existing now in the fields of satellite and wireless provision, but we need to take account of future technology. And we see in tests that wireless networks are delivering up to 100 megabits a second. There is no reason to believe why we won't be seeing vastly higher speeds in the future. And that's why it's so important. That's why it's so important that we enshrine this in legislation. And I hear the member for New England interjecting, and we saw how well his state counterpart went in Tamworth on the weekend. We saw how well the member for Port Macquarie went on the weekend.
The member for Cowper will be relevant to the bill.
Look, I'm being relevant because it's vitally important. It's vitally important that this amendment has the support of the crossbenchers, and I know that the member for Kennedy is keen to support this. I know the member for Kennedy supports this. It remains to be seen how the member for New England and how the member for Lyme will vote, whether they support this amendment or whether they roll over yet again, like they did on youth allowance, like they did on paid parental leave, roll over again. So I certainly commend this amendment to the House. I'm certainly looking for the support of the House to get this amendment up to enshrine the important principle of uniformity across technology. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is, the amendment moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for New England.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. A number of things I'd like to comment on, if I could. I think this piece of technology, the National Broadband Network, is potentially the greatest piece of regional infrastructure that we will see this century. It is the one thing, and I'm appalled at members of the National Party trivialising this debate in the way they are. And I'll ask the member for Cowper a question in a moment, and I'd like an answer to it, and I think the general public would like an answer. This is the one piece of infrastructure that actually negates distance as being a disadvantage. It is the one piece of infrastructure that creates enormous opportunities for country Australians. Enormous opportunities for country Australians. It is the one piece of infrastructure that, when you closely look at the sorts of benefits that will accrue to the nation and to country people in particular, there are some incredible opportunities. A lot of those opportunities haven't been invented yet, but the ones that have, and the way they can be extended into country Australia, is quite incredible. And I cannot believe that any member that represents or purports to represent the country areas of this nation, would actually find arguments to vote against it. Now, the member for Wentworth, and I have respect for the member for Wentworth, because I think he has long-term views in terms of some of the very important issues that confront this nation. Regrettably, his current leader doesn't. But I believe the member for Wentworth does have views. There were discussions earlier on, the member for Wentworth would be well aware of this, that in relation to a benefit-cost analysis, or some people call it a cost-benefit analysis. When I was at university, it was a benefit cost, but now it's apparently a cost-benefit. But
What university?
I'm delighted to see the member for Sturt here after that physical engagement that we had earlier. I thought it was very touching, very touching, and your invitation to join with you to form government, member for Sturt. Your invitation to join with you in the formation of a new government, I gave great consideration to, but came up with the argument that seeing you very rarely in the building, and and that you would in a sense have the balance of power, I thought it would be a highly irresponsible thing for me to do.
The member for New England should return to the issue under debate, please.
And the only way that the member for Stirk could have been engaged was via broadband technology, I think, because he'd be out of the building. That the member for Wentworth had made some key points early on about a cost-benefit analysis. And I spoke to Malcolm about this on a number of occasions, but the potential for country Australia, if there are 300,000 or 400,000 aged care people who are able to maintain residence in their homes for 1, 2 and 3 or 4 years, which is what they'd like to do, which they're quite capable of doing under this in-home, real-time monitoring of not only their health conditions but their whereabouts, instant contact with their loved ones, etc. What would that save the nation? What would be the social costs of those things? When you talk to people who want to do economic modelling on some of this stuff as to the all-up cost of this and the savings that would be accrued, it is very difficult for them. Am I allowed to go again? It is very difficult for them to come up with numbers because some of the technology hasn't been identified yet. But it is very clear that the major recipients, whether it be through health, country people trying to engage with specialists. We have this issue in the country that we cannot find enough doctors and allied professionals. This is the one piece of technology that can overcome that. We have issues with doctors in small towns. If the backup that can be provided through some of these technologies, it will give people the confidence to be able to be the doctor that has to take the accident victim and actually deal with it with some degree of confidence. So there's enormous benefits in some of this technology. But my question to the member for Cowper is, if I support this amendment, do you support the National Broadband Network, yes or no?
The member's time has expired. The member for New England has... The question is that the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the minister.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I'm just going backwards and
normally
forwards.
It crosses
the
from
debate,
side to side, but for you, the member for Kennedy, I will certainly
the minister
defer.
has the call. The member for Kennedy and anybody else on the other side will get the call. This isn't ending the debate. The minister has the call.
Thank you. The government is committed to the NBN providing national uniform wholesale pricing. This is set out in the government statement of expectations. Indeed, we have a range of mechanisms in order to require national uniform pricing for all services. Uniform pricing is embedded in NBN Co's network design and operation. NBN Co will be able to use revenue from lower cost, higher value markets like metropolitan areas to deliver equitable pricing outcomes for users in regional, rural and remote communities. To ensure these arrangements can be implemented to achieve this outcome, a number of authorisations have been included in the bill in relation to points of interconnection, the bundling of services and pricing practices reasonably necessary to deliver national uniform pricing. That uniform prices are being delivered will be obvious to all, as all NBN Co's pricing must be public. The government considers uniform pricing is so integral to NBN Co's mode of operation that further legislative requirements are not required. The uniformity requirement proposed by Senator Joyce and replicated by the member for Cowper here is not only unnecessary, it's actually unworkable in the way that they've put together these amendments. There are numerous drafting issues with the opposition's amendments. Their consequences are far from certain and may well undermine the very objective that they claim they're there to reinforce. Section 151DA5 provides a definition of when the outcome of uniform pricing is achieved. New section 6, as proposed by the opposition, purports to add to this a reference to a mechanism of that pricing, quote unquote. It's not clear how this new subsection 6 would or is intended to affect the definition of uniform national pricing as set out in subsection 5.
The Minister will resume his seat. The member for Bradfield on a point of order.
Speaker, the amendment as circulated, I can't see a reference to a new section 6. I wonder if subsection 6, I wonder if the Minister could clarify that.
The Minister has the call.
Nor is it clear in what way their new section is intended to require the ACCC to use the mechanism that is established. Furthermore, it's unclear what is meant by the cost of the average of the upload and download speeds of an eligible service. The proposed drafting demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of what the provisions are intended to deliver. Certainly for NBN Co to deliver the government's clearly stated policy of uniform national wholesale pricing. In the absence of effective provisions in the bill, NBN Co runs the risk of being in breach of provisions of the Competition and Consumer Act because it will require cross-subsidising of its services. A very important point that those opposite should actually think about. The member for Bradfield should understand those consequences for this bill. And contrary to the opposition's stated intention, which is why the government, contrary to those opposite, isn't just in word but in deed delivering this, which is why the government will not support this amendment. But once this debate is concluded, I will move that the House notes that a community impact statement will be prepared on all future policy decisions on technology, speed and/or price to assess impacts and opportunities on those unable to be serviced by fibre to the premises, and with regard to future technologies, the principle of uniform wholesale national pricing will be applied where possible. 2, the government is committed to uniform wholesale national pricing within technologies, a universal price for all customers receiving optic fibre, a universal price for all customers receiving fixed wireless, and a universal price for all customers receiving satellite. And 3, the NBN has achieved uniform national entry-level pricing across technologies, and where new technologies become available, will seek to maintain this principle at other product levels. That makes the position clear. It's consistent with what the government's done. It's consistent with what the regional independents want to achieve as a real outcome, and isn't just about rhetoric that's aimed at holding back and slowing down the NBN process.
The question is the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Kennedy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, just some brief observations. I want to back up very strongly my colleague from New England, and also thank very sincerely the independent senator from South Australia, Nick Xenophon, for moving and reinforcing in this legislation that we are going to be treated equally. For whilst they're rolling out a comprehensive delivery of services with very high speed, broad width, delivery of information in all its forms, there has always been a question mark hanging over whether we're going to get an equal price. And we thank very much the Leader of the House for the assurances that he's just provided the House. The proposal being moved by the member for Cowper, I might be voting against anything that says that we're going to get equal pricing. But one has to understand that there is some inconsistency when you're moving for equal pricing, but you're not actually going to provide the NBN service. Now, I mean, you've got to really understand how important this is for rural Australia. And I'm not saying that it mightn't be done, and I applaud the member for Wentworth, who has kept his gun loaded and has ridden shotgun all of the way on this. And I think that as a result of his energies, we won't see the sort of things happen that happened in the GFC, the handout with respect to the schools and the handout with respect to the insulation bats. And I think that's a very great credit to him. But for us to look a gift horse in the mouth here, when we're being provided with one of the most important move forwards that we will see in our lifetime, and that we should question and start fooling around with it. Well, you say what cost, and I take the interjection. I'll tell you what cost, the same sort of cost that gives Brisbane 20,000 million on their highway to the Gold Coast, but doesn't give 1/10 of the population, which lives in far north Queensland, a single cent for their roads. That's the sort of cost that you don't understand with respect to what we call the tyranny of the majority. I'll give you recommended reading so you can catch up on the democratic forms of government. But unfortunately, we live in a situation where the winner takes all. But for once in our history, in the last 40 or 50 years, for once in our history, the winner can't take all, because we're sitting here and we're going to get a deal, and we've got a deal for rural Australia. Chifley had to make a decision after the war on whether he was going to deliver phones to every house in Australia. And if you want to go back and have a look at the arguments here, the same silly people were sitting on this side of the House arguing that every house in Australia couldn't have a telephone because it'd cost too much. Well, thank the good Lord, because my family come from Cloncurry, where they lived for over a century. Thank the good Lord that Chifley was listened to and not the opposition. Now we've got to move forward, and yes, there might be some other technologies out there. I haven't heard the opposition put forward a single solitary alternative technology, and that they think we should wait for some science fiction fantasy to jump out from behind a bush and provide a service for us. Well, too bad for you. Too bad for you. We've got an offer on the table and we're going to take it. And rural Australia is going to be looked after. And those that haven't voted for it, well, I hope that the electors remember. The
question is that the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Lyne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will try and be brief. And it is in response to comments from the member for Cowper and the amendment before the House, where a lot of work has gone in today to try and get a resolution that is an outcome for the greater good of better ICT services in regional areas and less about political positioning and rhetoric. I am, I guess, not surprised by the lack of shame and the enormous inconsistency in the amendment put forward today. And I start where the member for New England finished and put it on the member for Cowper. The question of whether or not they are supportive of the substance of the bill. Because if they are not proposing amendments in detail that are implying support for the bill, is hypocrisy and inconsistency of the highest order. So I am assuming, based on what I have heard from a neighbouring MP in public domains for the last 6 to 12 months in and around the Coffs Harbour community, even though it is one of the first rollout sites, the member for Cowper has been quite open about the fact he is not supportive of NBN. He has been quite open about saying this is a cost that the country cannot afford. He has not considered, in my view, the issues around the innovation and entrepreneurship opportunities that come with the benefit side of a rollout of better ICT in regional communities such as the Mid-North Coast. So to take that position publicly and then to come down to Canberra and move amendments to make the cost higher, if the criticism has been that the cost of the NBN is too high, the amendment you are moving today is increasing that bill. There is no shame at this point about that inconsistency. As well, with a rollout site in the community and this running around at home in the electorate of Cowper by saying that they don't support it, he doesn't support it publicly, again then sneaking down to Canberra, moving amendments in Canberra in detail about the policy to potentially show off to parliamentary colleagues that you get the detail. Again, that is dripping with hypocrisy and is shameless in the duplicity between what you're doing in your electorate and what you're doing here in Parliament House. As well, I think there is a moment where we need to reflect on why we are even having this debate. It took a tight parliament to achieve an outcome on uniform national wholesale pricing. And if we really want to cut to the chase, it took some independent members negotiating on behalf of regional Australia something that is very important for regional communities in regards pricing and cost of living. Why on earth wasn't this done before? There have been plenty of coalition governments going back to the 1940s where this could have been negotiated and hasn't. It is dripping with shameless hypocrisy and inconsistency once again for a speech that I just heard criticising the member for New England and myself for taking the position that we have in making uniform national wholesale pricing an issue in the first place, getting the concept into this parliament in the first place, and then for some reason being criticised because of that. We have negotiated all day to try and get an outcome that captures the spirit of what is trying to be achieved in regards to uniform national wholesale pricing. I'm very pleased that now moving forward we have that locked down with a resolution to come in the parliament, and I'm very pleased that we've got a community impact statement that will be attached to any future policy decisions around technology, speed and price. I'm also pleased, in the sake of taxpayers, that we have saved a substantial amount of money today by not having to see a recall of the Senate and a recall of the House of Representatives to get this issue resolved. Potentially somewhere in the order of $2 and $4 million of taxpayers' money has been saved by that work today. Again, will we get thanks from the member for Cowper, or will we get criticism? We will get criticism.
The member's
and he is not supporting the substance of the bill.
The question is the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I'm going to call the member for Kooyong because he has kept jumping graciously. The member for Kooyong.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on the amendments before the House, and particularly the constraints placed on the ACCC by this government and the abuse of process and power that represents when it comes to the NBN. Not only is this government creating a $50 billion white elephant when you take into account the debt, the equity and the payments to Telstra, but this has morphed from a $4.7 billion original investment, and it's now been received comments from groups like the Economist Intelligence Unit, which compared it to the Korean National Broadband Initiative, when it said that in Australia we are getting 1/10 of the speed of Korea at 24 times the price. So why has this government in the dead of night last week introduced nearly 30 pages of complex amendments and not subjected to scrutiny? Why does it not have the courage to put its amendments before the House in a proper way? And why, when it comes to the ACCC and the issues that we're debating at the moment, why has it allowed the NBN company to have the benefit of a statutory authorisation to allow it to escape the proper scrutiny of the ACCC when it comes to the bundling of services, when it comes to cross-subsidisation, when it comes to uniform pricing? These are important matters, and the government's initiatives are going to reduce competition. And what is more, Senator Conroy should know better as the minister, because in March 2010 he went on Lateline, and these are his words. He said he was putting in place, quote, important regulatory protections for all Australians so that in the future, when the national broadband network is up and running, that it has some regulations. Powers for the ACCC to deal with the national broadband network, because there's no point in getting rid of one vertically integrated monopoly to create another unregulated monopoly. So now the minister is damned by his own words, because the amendments that he has sought to bring has actually reduced the influence and the authority of the ACCC. We should not expect anything different, Madam Deputy Speaker, from this government, because it has not subject the NBN to proper scrutiny. No parliamentary oversight from the Public Works Committee, even though it's the greatest public works initiative undertaken in Australia's history. Not subject to FOI, even though it was the Rudd government that went to the election. The Rudd government that went to the election and promised to, quote, restore trust in integrity in the use of Commonwealth government information, promoting a pro-disclosure culture and protecting the public interest through genuine reform. It has not done that because it's exempting the FOI. It has not put it before the Infrastructure Australia. Infrastructure Australia is a body set up with specific expertise in the telecommunications sector, and it won't refer it to Infrastructure Australia. And I was with the Public Accounts and Audit Committee the other day, and we had the head of Infrastructure Australia, and he confirmed that was the case. It won't allow scrutiny from the Productivity Commission, even though it will allow the Greens, request for the Productivity Commission to investigate the NBN prior to sale. But why won't it allow the Productivity Commission to use its expertise now? And why won't it release fully the business case that it had undertaken? It only released a couple of hundred of 400 pages, and it made the independent sign confidentiality agreements. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our alternative policy, and it's been said by the member for New England and others that we don't have an alternative policy. Yes, we do. We have an affordable, effective broadband alternative policy, one that is costed over the next 7 years at around $6 billion, one that uses the variety of technologies, wireless, satellite and fibre, one that actually leverages off the private sector and just doesn't create a new government monopoly, right? One that won't run away from the ACCC, the FOI, the Productivity Commission. Madam Deputy Speaker, we on this House proudly support privatisation. We on this House proudly support competition. We on this House proudly support an affordable broadband network. But we will not support this government's running away from proper scrutiny.
The question is the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I'm going to call the member for Wentworth as he hasn't had the go yet. The member for Wentworth has the call.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to respond to the member for New England and also the members for Lyne and Kennedy. I entirely agree with them about the need for better communications in regional Australia, and indeed right through Australia. And it's not just limited to telecommunications, it applies to roads and air transport and rail and so forth. It is good transport and communications technology can annihilate distance. There's no doubt about that. And so I am as committed as they are to ensuring that there is fast broadband right across Australia. The only issue, however, is the manner in which it is delivered. The thing that makes the NBN so expensive is not the fact that it is going to provide telecommunications into the bush. In the 7%, of course, as we know, it'll be delivered by fixed wireless and satellite. But it is not that. It is the fact that it is running fibre into every house. The cost of rolling out a network like this is about 75% civil works. That is to say, digging ditches, running cable, and most of that, of course, is labour. So the real question in terms of cost, when you boil it down and get beyond the arguments about whether it's a benefit-cost analysis or a cost-benefit analysis, either way we should have had one, but the real issue is, do you need to run fibre into every residence? And the point that we've made again and again is that you simply don't. And other countries with very fast broadband and very highly developed technology cultures like Korea do not have fibre into every apartment or into every house. So there is a cheaper way of delivering the goal that you and I and every other member of this House, I believe, subscribes to. Now, turning more particularly to the member for Cowper's amendment, the object of this is very simple, and I'm disappointed that the country independents appear not to be likely to support it, but I hope you do. I'm going to try and change your mind here. I know you've got some warm words from the minister here, but there's no substitute for legislative language. What this amendment will mean is that if in the future there is a 25 or 50 megabit per second service delivered over satellite or over fixed wireless, and of course the technology is there to deliver that today, I might say, but let's say that is broadly available. What this amendment would mean is that would have to be sold or made available on a wholesale basis by the NBN at the same price that it was made available in the cities, where obviously if you do have a fibre to the home network, your very, very high speeds will be available pretty much as wherever they are sought. So what this amendment will do is entrench in law the protection that you, the member for New England, so passionately spoke in favour of. So while I recognise that there have from time to time been certain disagreements and frictions with the National Party, I wouldn't allow that. I'd submit to the House, and particularly to the member for New England, not to allow that to cloud their vision over what this amendment will do. This will ensure that whenever there is an enhanced service available over wireless and satellite for regional Australia, which isn't served by wireline, then it must be offered at no greater a price than must be offered at the same or lower price than it is offered in the city. Now that surely is what the constituents of the three honourable gentlemen I'm looking at now would want to have protected. I'm sure that's what they want to achieve. This provision does that, and it does no more than that. And it's all very well for the minister to say it talks about unforeseen consequences and so forth. The language speaks for itself. It is very straightforward. It means that the price per megabit, the wholesale price, must be the same regardless of the technology. That's what you've said you want to achieve. That's what this amendment delivers, and that's why it should have your support.
The question is the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for New England.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The member for Cowper still hasn't answered the question, and does he, if this amendment is supported, will he support the bill? The substantive bill that is before the Parliament. Is the National Party going to support this bill, or is the National Party going to do as the member for Wentworth just did a moment ago, get a city Liberal to run cover for them, as they always do on these sorts of issues? The member for Cowper, if he can't answer the question, they might get the member for Wentworth to answer it on his behalf, because the member for Wentworth does get out into the country occasionally. He doesn't live there, but he does get out into the country occasionally. I'm proud to support this bill, very proud to support this bill. I ran on it before the election campaign in my electorate, and it was one of the determining factors in relation to the choice of government. It was put to Tony Abbott as clearly as it was put to Julia Gillard. It was denounced by the coalition. The National Party in particular did as they were told, as they would normally do in these sorts of circumstances. And now we see a massive policy shift coming in at the last minute. Coming in, and that's why this question is so important. If this amendment is supported, does this mean that the coalition supports the national broadband network? Now, the member for Wentworth has just said no, but the member for Cowper hasn't enunciated his particular position as yet. There's been some degree of criticism in the last few days about independents and the fact that they may or may not have been listening to their constituency. In my electorate, 53% of the state, the two electorates within the state of Northern Tablelands and Tamworth, 53% of those constituents voted for their primary vote, voted for an independent. So a majority in my electorate are in favour of independence. I just want to get that on the public record. But one other thing I'd like to state in relation to the honourable Senator, Senator Joyce, in the Senate. Some people in this place have very short memories. About 90% of country people opposed the sale of Telstra. Senator Joyce said in the deal with the President of the National Farmers Federation, Peter Corish at the time, that a deal had been done with the Prime Minister and parity of pricing for broadband and telephone services would be enshrined in legislation. At least it was legislation they were prepared to support. The fact that it went missing when the legislation came before the Parliament is something that Senator Joyce and others in the National Party should be able to clarify, and the Minister might do that on their behalf, because I think he's the spokesman for them at the moment. But the other issues that I'd just like to raise as to the criticism of country independence that the member for Cowper made, I am proud to support the inquiry into the Murray-Darling, and I think the member for Wentworth is as well. I do give him credit for that. I'm proud to be part of a parliament that will actually look a bit long-term in terms of some of the environmental and economic issues that are out there. I'm proud to live in the Murray-Darling system, and I'll be proud to die in it. Hopefully not too soon. But the other issues that I'm proud of, I'm proud that this parliament will in fact have a constructive look at climate change and how it impacts on Australia. Not this nonsense debate that we're having at the moment about a tax and a lie, a debate about a couple of words. This is a serious debate, it's serious people, and there again the member for Wentworth shines out like a little bit of a beacon in the coalition benches at the moment. At least he's thinking about some of these long-term issues. I'm proud to have been associated with the member for Lyne in negotiating the Health and Hospital Fund, so that 100% of that fund would go to country people that have missed out in the past, irrespective of who's been in government. And we have people like the member for Riverina begging now that they get money out of that fund for the Wagga Hospital. The hypocrisy of some of these people in terms of criticising the very people that have achieved the outcomes that they want to drink from is quite disgraceful. And you people ought to wake up to yourselves. If you're serious about supporting country people, get serious about the policies that you put in place and stop criticising others that are trying to do the right thing by them. And my question again is to the member for Cowper: if your amendments are supported, do you support the National Broadband Network? You are the National Party spokesman here today.
Expired. The question is that the amendment moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Cowper.
Thanks. Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak again and put on the record yet again the fact that the coalition certainly does support high-speed broadband throughout Australia. And the difference of opinion we have in this House, is how we actually deliver that outcome. On this side of the House, we believe that it's appropriate that government get involved in providing high-speed broadband for people in regional and rural areas, or high-speed broadband for those people in other areas where speeds are insufficient, where service is insufficient. That is the role of government. But as funds are not unlimited, as resources are not unlimited, it would appear a waste of taxpayers' money to provide broadband in areas where there are good services. And that is the point of difference that we have. On this side of the House, we believe that high-speed broadband should be provided at the taxpayer's cost where there is market failure, where services are not up to scratch. And that has been our position all along. That has been my position all along. What we believe on this side of the House, there is no place for wasting taxpayers' money, replacing broadband delivery methods where the speeds available are already acceptable. It would appear crazy to duplicate the service that can be delivered to 2.9 million homes in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. That would appear to be a very poor use of taxpayers' funds, and that is reflected in the rate of return on the project, which struggles to achieve 7% IRR. And when you factor in the potential for competition, without discriminating against competition under the proposed business plan and under the proposed legislation, that return falls to 5%, and it will be the taxpayers of regional and rural Australia that will be subsidising the duplication of services that already exist in the city, and that is a big point of difference between us. We are very focused on the need for high-quality services. We certainly agree with you on the point that high-quality services right across the country are vitally important, that bridging the digital divide is vitally important. We agree with you on that. The thing we don't agree with is wasting taxpayers' money and the ability of this government to deliver a project of this magnitude and the way in which this project lacks scrutiny. We know that the government will not submit this project to a cost-benefit analysis because it knows it will not pass muster. We know that this project is being propped up firstly through taxpayers' funds and secondly through restrictions on competition. And the member for New England did talk about independence in his electorate, and I do want to just quote from Richard Turnbull, who was quoted in the press as saying, "The destruction of the independent brand rests with the perceived conduct of the federal independents." That's a quote from Mr Richard Turnbull. And Mr Draper said Mr Oakeshot's 17-minute speech last year about his deal with Labor had done irreparable damage to the cause of the independents.
Order.
So that's not,
the member for Cowper will resume his seat. The minister.
I know it's hard for the member for Cowper to defend his position, but he needs to do that.
The member for Cowper. The point of order is relevance. I understand that the member for Cowper is responding to the remarks from the member for New England, but I would ask him to quickly come to the point.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. But I will conclude by again reiterating the fact that on both sides of the House we see the need for high-quality broadband. The difference between us is the way you deliver those speeds, is the way that you distribute taxpayers' funds, because it is the people of regional Australia who would be providing in no small part the taxpayers' dollars that fund the NBN. So I see no reason for regional and rural Australians to have their taxpayers' money squandered in replacing services in the city that are already of a reasonable standard and that already deliver good connectivity to people in metropolitan areas, such as the HFC network that can already deliver 100 megabits a second. Why would we waste regional and rural Australians' taxpayers' money ripping up backyards in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane when those services can already be delivered at an appropriate speed? That is a very appropriate point of view. It makes sense. I'm sorry that the member for New England can't see that, but I'm certainly happy to keep repeating the message until he does.
The question is that amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The question has been put as to the rationale for moving this amendment, and the question has been asked by the member for Lyne and the member for New England, amongst others, and I think by implication by the member for Kennedy. All of them are long-standing and passionate advocates for improved rural communications. I well remember meeting and being struck by the forceful personality of the member for Kennedy when I was a recently arrived staffer for the then Minister for Communications, Senator Alston. And he spoke passionately about the need to improve communications in the little town of Julia Creek in his community. He's been a very long-time advocate for improved rural communications, as have the other two independent members who've already spoken in this debate. All fair-minded Australians want to see a dramatic improvement in communications delivered to rural and remote Australia. And that's been one of the pressing issues in telecommunications policy in Australia for the last 15 years. When I first started working in this field, we were receiving representations from farmers who were concerned about the fact that their dial-up internet speed was 1.2 kilobits per second. That was in 1996 and 1997. So while we may sometimes forget how far we have come an enormously long way. But there is no dispute on this side of the chamber that we have a further distance to go. And we are very strong supporters of improving Australia's broadband infrastructure, including in rural and remote Australia. That is why, in the policy we took to the 2010 election, we committed over $6 billion of public spending, by any measure a very large amount of money, and the vast bulk of that was for rural and remote Australia. in over $1 billion for a wireless network using, I might say, the same spectrum and the same technology as the Labor Party is proposing to use for the wireless component of the national broadband network. And I'd venture to suggest that when it comes to the services that will be delivered in Julia Creek, there is no difference between what the Labor Party is proposing and what we are proposing. There is no contention about the need to improve broadband in rural and remote Australia. Which brings me to the question, Madam Deputy Speaker, what then is behind our thinking in putting forward this amendment? Madam Deputy Speaker, we are simply seeking to have the government deliver on the commitments it has made, because a specific commitment made by the government to underpin this policy architecture is that there will be uniform wholesale pricing across Australia. That is, let us be clear, a very difficult thing to achieve. The brutal economics of telecommunications mean that it is vastly more expensive to deliver services in rural Australia than in metropolitan Australia. There is simply no way around that fact, and that has been a central element of telecommunications policy, a central challenge for telecommunications policy in Australia for many years. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we look at a sweeping promise made by the Labor government, which we know is very, very difficult to achieve given the fundamental realities of telecommunications economics, and when we know that this is the promise that has been made to independent members in this place and through them to people in rural and remote Australia, we say to ourselves, we are frankly somewhat suspicious that that commitment is reduced or is contained in the legislation only in respect of the services which are delivered over the present generation of wireless and satellite. We ask ourselves, is this because the National Broadband Network Company is trying to find ways to claw back some of the difficulties in meeting this economic challenge, and have they therefore asked to have this legislation silent on this point? Well, what we are putting forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that if that is the policy of the government, then we are offering this legislative drafting suggestion, because this suggestion, we say, is necessary to cause this government to be true to the commitments it has made. We are very clear in terms of where we stand on the National Broadband Network. There can be no doubt about that. But what underpins this amendment is that if a commitment has been made, then it needs to be delivered on, and that is the rationale on which we put forward this amendment.
The question is that the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I'm going to call the member for Lyne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What has been revealed this afternoon is we are being asked a question on an amendment to a bill that the National Party and the Coalition substantially do not support. The question is why? Because the only conclusion that can be drawn is mischief. We are also being asked, the Coalition is, and it was revealed in the member for Cowper's comments, the member for Wentworth's comments, and a range of speeches that have been delivered this afternoon expressing a continued campaign about the cost of a national broadband network rollout. Yet this amendment increases that cost, and we are being asked by the Coalition to support it. When you yourselves as a coalition are raising the issue of the cost of the NBN, how on earth can you then look us straightly in the eye and say you are asking MPs, myself, the member for Kennedy, the member for New England, to increase that cost that you are oh so concerned about? And I suspect when this gets knocked back and we will see a reverting to the norm of criticism of the crossbenchers for taking on that hypocrisy and that inconsistency. I would hope we as members of this chamber are focused on outcomes over the politics, on delivery over the rhetoric. Today we've negotiated, I think, a pretty good outcome as a consequence of this process and the issues that have been raised. We have now locked away a community impact statement that will be part of the policy process on behalf of the 7%, those that won't be covered by the fibre to the home or fibre to the premises rollout. That's some good work that's been achieved today as a consequence of us all coming back. And I think it does, in the policy process, put first and foremost those 7% who are up the hills and in the valleys where technology just cannot reach. And I think that is a commitment from this House that recognises the importance of that principle of equity of service delivery. I hope that is a shared and common view when we walk out of here today. So I say to all regional MPs, regardless of the absurdities of some of the positions of people today, I would hope at the end of today there's a recognition we've achieved some outcomes for the greater good based around this principle of equity of service delivery. I suspect there'll be some reverting to norm. I suspect there'll be some people playing some, some local electorate positioning about who's betrayed who. And if so, let's have that debate. But in the end, those that are supposedly concerned about costs have revealed their strategy of mischief today in the way they are using this chamber to achieve policy outcomes that aren't in the national interest. They're just in personal political interests or party political interests. That says a lot, and hopefully it's not lost in the eyes of community when they consider today's debate.
The question is that the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Wentworth.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to take issue with the member for Lyons' remarks about cost. And he seems to think there is some inconsistency between the Coalition being concerned about the cost of the NBN and its cost effectiveness, and at the same time seeking to ensure by means of a provision, an express provision in an Act of Parliament, that there should be uniform national pricing across technologies so that people in the honourable member's electorate and other regional electorates do not pay any more for their broadband on a megabit per second basis. Now, there is no inconsistency at all, because what the honourable member is doing, with respect to him, is precisely what the government has done, which is to confuse the objects of the NBN with the means. The object of the NBN, I apprehend, is to ensure that all Australians have access to fast broadband, high-speed broadband at an affordable price. That's the objective. The means, well, there are many means, even under the NBN scheme. There's fibre to the home, there's fixed wireless, there's satellite. But there are other technological means of delivering it. And our concern is that the mix of technologies should be such that it delivers the objective of the NBN, universal broadband, fast broadband, at the lowest cost to the taxpayer. In other words, in the most cost-effective way. Now, one of the objectives of the NBN, if it is to deliver universal fast broadband, must be to deliver universal fast broadband across regional and rural Australia and at an affordable price which is no greater than that offered in the city. So that is one of the objectives. Is that an expensive objective? Well, of course it is. But that is an objective which must be fulfilled, and our support for which does not detract from our concern about the cost-effectiveness of the network overall. I mean, we recognise, and we recognised when we were in government with the OPEL scheme that the member for Bradfield's spoken about several times today, and very knowledgeably, we recognised with OPEL that to deliver fast broadband to the bush you would need to have a subsidy, and it was a substantial one. And whether that subsidy is delivered as a cash payment by government in one form or another, or by way of cross-subsidy, we recognise there has to be some financial support. So the honourable member and the Coalition are completely at one in terms of the objective of delivering fast broadband across Australia. We are completely at one, so it would seem, in terms of the need to deliver fast broadband at the same price in regional Australia as it's available in the cities. And the honourable member may well be satisfied with a community impact statement tendered by the government, and it shows a touching and endearing faith in the good word and reliability of the Leader of the House. But nonetheless, But there is no substitute. The honourable member should know this. There is no substitute for express words in an Act of Parliament, because that Act will be there long after the minister opposite has moved on to other responsibilities and perhaps long after the member for Lyne is no longer in this House. That Act has got the greatest chance of providing long-term support for the objective which apparently we all share. And so it is not a question here of cost effectiveness. We recognise the objective of uniform pricing for regional Australia, or uniform pricing across Australia, which will benefit regional Australia. We recognise that objective, and that must be achieved at a cost. Obviously, it should be done as efficiently as possible, but we recognise there is a cost. This statutory language the member for Cowper has proposed will ensure that it is delivered, and he won't just be comfortable with the warm words from the Leader of the House.
The question is that the amendments moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. I call the member for Kennedy.
I think there is a great ideological divide between the crossbenchers in this place and the two mainstream parties. Basically, we believe essential services should be in the hands of the people and not in the hands of private enterprise, which can be sold off, and even if it wasn't to be sold off, to overseas interests. Has it been good for us in Queensland Rail when it was corporatised and parcels went over? We had a 600% increase in country areas in our parcels freight. 600% increase. Was it good for us? It was disastrous for us. In electricity, there has been a doubling of cost since it was corporatised in Queensland. A doubling of cost in the space of about 6 or 7 years. Free skies policy, I think it's been good for the cities. Absolutely disastrous for some regional areas. We went from $100 to get from Mount Isa to Townsville to $400. It sure would be nice to see my son a bit, but it slows you down a bit if it's $1,000 to get across to the coast. In banking, well, when we get in trouble before, we had our state bank and it gave us interest rates at 2%. When we get in trouble now, it goes up to 12%. So I get sugarcane farmers all over the place paying 12% at the present moment, whereas under a banking that was government owned, the cost of a motor car, the free market was going to cut down the cost of a motor car, went up 600%. We were told when the tariffs were removed, price was going to go down, went up 600%. Look, the real issue here, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real issue here is that the communication system has broken down. Under privatisation, and Ziggy Sikowski is not entirely innocent here, but under Sol Trujillo, the maintenance staff was halved and almost halved again. So no maintenance was done. And I put to the member for Wentworth that the maintenance was not only on the main lines, but it was on the maintenance to the houses as well. And heaven only knows the system is 60 or 70 years old in delivering to the houses themselves. But without any maintenance done upon it in the last 10 or 15 years, then that system has collapsed. I mean, the real issue here is whether you're going to continue with a collapsed system or whether you're going to replace that system with something that is state-of-the-art and modern technology. The member for Brad Kooyong, and I noticed that it's the member for Kooyongs and Bradfields that are speaking in this place, not the members from regional Australia. There's a certain lack of enthusiasm from them. That they're very, very keen to stop this from going ahead, so that once again the country can be stripped to look after the already fat and wealthy cities of Australia. But let me just say that the system has collapsed, and it's got to be replaced, and the cost of replacement is going to have to be met by somebody, and clearly the corporate entities are not going to meet that cost. Clearly the taxpayer is going to have to meet that cost, and that cost has to be provided because you people, and also the ALP, you privatised Telstra, and you told us it was going to cut our costs down and our maintenance was going to be maintained. Well, I sat there in that joint party room and they said, oh, we'll give you a universal service obligation. Well, I don't like to come to this place and prance great high-sounding ideals. I like to be very specific. In 20 years in the state parliament, I had one town go out for one day. Since the complete privatisation of Telstra, I have had 7 communities go out for up to 2 weeks. Up to 2 weeks. And these are big communities. And the reason why it is not working now is because the system hasn't been maintained, because Wonderboy, Mr Tjillo, came to this country, halved and halved again the maintenance crews, and then said, aren't we making a lot of money, aren't I a grand fellow, and walked away with 54 million according to newspapers. Well, I mean, the honourable member for Kooyong thinks this funny, that he got away with 54 million and the whole Telstra system of Australia collapsed. He thinks this is a subject for humour that he can laugh at. Well, let me tell you, it's no laughing matter when you talk to ordinary people and they tell you that they can't afford to keep up their telephone charges or their electricity charges or their water charges. And who was responsible for that? You privatisers were responsible for that. But you looked after your mates. They've done very well.
Time
They've done very well indeed.
Expired. The Minister. The member for Lyne.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I just want to put on record, because it's rare that this chamber does cut to the chase of the detail of policy debates, and I'm pleased we are cutting to the chase on this one. We are talking about uniform national wholesale pricing, something this parliament has not dealt with for way too long. So I'm pleased that there is some consistency about that. What is extraordinary today is the policy shift from the coalition, and I'm enlightened by that policy shift. We now have an admission that there is not support for the bill, the substance of the National Broadband Network. But for those that do support the bill, what the coalition is asking those that support the substance of that bill to do is to go for a platinum standard, not a gold standard. You are asking those that support the bill not only to support uniform national wholesale pricing within technology, you are asking us to go beyond supporting. You are asking us to support uniform national wholesale pricing at an entry level higher than across technology. You are asking us to do the extraordinary move of, even if where fibre is being delivered at 100 megabits per second to the city, that same price should be delivered to the most remote location of Australia. So you are taking a dual position of opposing the substance of a national broadband network and then at the same time arguing a case of equity of services at the highest available service around. That is an extraordinary step that the coalition is asking for those that support the bill. You've got to clarify your position. If you support the bill, it's an enlightened move and one I will do what I can to support for those that support equity of services. But until you support the backbone of a national broadband network, we're going nowhere fast, and it remains inconsistent and hypocritical, as the member for Cowper's amendment suggests.
Order. The question is that the amendment moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. The Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I want to support the comments made by the member for Lyne and add to them, because I think it very much cuts to the chase of what this is about. Earlier on we had from the member for Bradfield a point of order while I was speaking to the amendment moved by Mr Hartziker, the member for Cowper, the ironically termed Shadow Minister for Regional Communications. And in terms of the amendment, I was speaking to the one that I was given by the member for Cowper about an hour and a half ago, but it changed. The numbers changed, so we're just wrong. And there's a range of things. It was on the table here. It's on the official letterhead of the Parliament of Australia. And they also, in addition, this amendment moved by the member for Cowper is worth looking at. The amendment uses 3 different terms: eligible service, broadband service and particular service. but the effect and interrelations between those three terms is completely unclear. Completely unclear. And yet they expect us to support an amendment to the law of the land where the implications are simply not clear. For instance, the reference to broadband service suggests that Section 151DA is to have no application in relation to eligible services provided by NBN Co that are for the carriage of voice communication. It's sloppy. It's as sloppy as the 12 years of policy failure of those opposite. The member for Wentworth would have us believe that we're all in favour of fast, high-speed broadband, except for the reality of the national broadband network which is being rolled out. It is real. It is happening. It is delivering. In Tasmania, it's being rolled out. In northwestern Queensland, it's being rolled out. In New England, what they had to say contradicts what he has actually had to say about the NBN, where the member for Wentworth said in the Australian on the 12th of January, the temptation for the NBN to move into areas where it's competing with the private sector will be almost irresistible. He also went on to say that on the 4th of February, and I quote, "I don't think the NBN will ever be built because there are too many questions about how little benefit it will actually provide." There's a range of others. Barnaby Joyce has had this to say on the 20th of January. The Labor Party's desire to continue on with the NBN, whilst Queensland Rail, as just one of the many example of many, tells us it will take months to get the lines between Emerald and Rockhampton up and running, is economically libellous in its negligence. The Shadow Minister for Finance has had to say, at the top of the list, plans for the national broadband network should be put on hold until its value is established through a benefit cost study. Now, I actually think that the case for fast, high-speed broadband is clear. I think the case for benefiting regional Australia are particularly clear. I had a question without notice from a government member last week about delivery of transport services, rail services, and the difference in the relationship that it has to reducing our emissions. The National Broadband Network is the railway of this century. It will overcome the tyranny of distance. It is the most important thing that we can do for regional Australia. It will have an impact in reducing our emissions at will. It will change the way that we work and the way that we live. It will have a revolutionary impact and is already in terms of education and health. It's about upload, not just download. It's about what can be done and providing the same opportunity for someone in Mount Isa as someone in Stanmore. At the moment, they don't have that same opportunity. We are about getting on with this. The amendment move would simply delay it, would mean there's more need for more parliamentary sittings, all about delay and prevarication. Everything that they have done opposite today has been aimed at that, and that is all they have done throughout this debate.
Has expired. The question is that the amendment moved by the member for Cowper be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the noes have it. Division required? Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Order. Lock the doors. The question is that the amendment moved by the member for Cowper to Senate Amendment 2 be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. And I appoint the honourable members for Barker and Parkes tellers for the ayes and the members for Fowler and Shortland tellers for the noes. The result of the division is ayes 44, noes 57. The question is therefore negative. The question now is that Senate Amendments numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10 and 13 be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. 1 minute.
Yes.
Lock the doors. The question is that the second group of Senate amendments, that is Senate amendments numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10 and 13 be agreed to. I appoint the honourable members for Shortland and Fowler tellers for the ayes and the members for Parkes and Barker tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 58, noes 42. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. Minister.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave, as I foreshadowed, to move that the House notes that 1. A community impact statement will be prepared on all future policy decisions on technology, speed and/or price to assess impacts and opportunities on those unable to be serviced by fibre to the premises. And with regard to future technologies, the principle of uniform wholesale national pricing will be applied where possible. 2. The government is committed to uniform wholesale national pricing within technologies, a universal price for all customers receiving optic fibre, a universal price for all customers receiving fixed wireless, and a universal price for all customers receiving satellite. And 3. The NBN has achieved uniform national entry-level pricing across technologies, and where new technologies become available, will seek to maintain this principle at other product levels.
Is leave granted? Leave is not granted.
I move that so much
The
of
Minister.
standing and sessional orders be suspended as would permit the following motion to be moved by the Leader of the House. That the House notes that 1. A community impact statement will be prepared on all future policy decisions on technology, speed and/or price to assess impacts and opportunities on those unable to be serviced by fibre to the premises, and with regard to future technologies, the principle of uniform wholesale national pricing will be applied where possible. 2. The government is committed to uniform wholesale national pricing within technologies, a universal price for all customers receiving optic fibre, a universal price for all customers receiving fixed wireless, and a universal price for all customers receiving satellite. And 3, the NBN has achieved uniform national entry-level pricing across technologies, and where new technologies become available, will seek to maintain this principle at other product levels. Mr. Speaker, what we've seen today is absolute hypocrisy from those opposite. They say that we need to have high-speed broadband, but they oppose the vehicle to deliver that high-speed broadband, the National Broadband Network. They say they're concerned about pricing, whether in regional Australia or in urban communities. But here they oppose, even having debated in this House, this resolution before this House. This resolution, which will be supported by government members and by independent crossbenchers. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that there are people in regional Australia who have stood up for their local communities, but there aren't any over on that side of the chamber because they ignore the benefits that the National Broadband Network can give. Now, the fact is that this resolution, because it's a suspension of standing orders, won't get a statutory majority of the House. The fact is, therefore, it will not occur. They had an opportunity tonight. They were given notice more than an hour ago in my speech when I foreshadowed this resolution that would be moved before the House today. This resolution to give more weight and further commitment regarding a community impact statement being prepared on all future policy decisions on technology, speed and/or price to assess impacts. We believe that the National Broadband Network will be the great leveller between regional Australia and those in inner urban communities. We believe that it is the great opportunity that we have to overcome the tyranny of distance. We live in a country where we have a relatively sparse population spread over such a large land mass. And if any country in the world should be addressing the issue of the National Broadband Network...
Leader of the House will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, much as I hate to interrupt the Leader of the House, the truth is that this is a motion to suspend standing orders, and what the Leader of the House has to address is why it is that standing orders should be suspended so as to debate this motion at this time without any notice. That's the question he has to address.
I thank the Manager of Opposition Business for putting the point of order on the record, but there has not been the way that suspensions of standing orders have been conducted over the past few weeks. I would urge the Leader of the House to keep the point that the Manager of Opposition Business raised in mind, but he has the call.
Mr. Speaker, and I certainly will bear it in mind, and I'll bear it in mind at the play school time of 10 to 3 every day when question time is interrupted by those opposite, so that the Leader of the Opposition and their seconder can get on TV before play school. I'll bear it in mind in terms of that point of order by the Manager of Opposition Business, and when it happens during the next suspension, bear in mind that when I'm on my feet moving points of order at a regular interval, because what we need is a bit of consistency around here. But this is what this debate is about: consistency. Forget about no notice.
Order. The Leader of the House will resume his seat.
It is on the question.
Order. The member for Mackellar will wait for the call. The member for Mackellar.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It is required under the standing orders that the Minister address the question of why the standing orders should be suspended. And I would draw the distinction between this and other suspension motions that have moved, because we have for hours been debating this topic. The Minister clearly has nothing new to say and therefore must return to the subject.
The member will resume her seat. I will draw any distinctions on these suspensions. The Leader of the House, I have given him an opinion, whilst I'm not upholding the points of order. The Leader of the House has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I gave notice of moving this motion to the Shadow Minister and indeed to the entire House, if you check Hansard. I read out the words of this motion more than an hour ago. We had a debate that was participated in by more than a dozen members of this House about these very questions. But when you put up a resolution that's about a solution, what do? They oppose it. Not only do they oppose it, which is their right to do, they try to stop it even being debated. And that's why we should suspend standing orders. We should suspend standing orders to allow this debate to happen, because we on this side of the House are happy to debate uphill and down Dale, whether it be in Sydney or in Port Macquarie or Adelaide or even in the electorate of Wentworth. We're happy to debate the issue of the national broadband network. We're certainly happy to debate it in Tasmania, where it is being rolled out and is very popular in the electorate of Lyons, the electorate of Franklin, the electorate of Braddon, the electorate of Bass, being rolled out, very popular, and indeed the electorate of the member for Denison is supporting this resolution as well. But what this has done, the opposition to leave being granted and the opposition of those opposite to the suspension of standing orders, and they're getting in the way of this resolution being moved, what they are doing once again is fulfilling their commitment to destroy the NBN, to block, to oppose, to not put up anything that is constructive when it comes to the future agenda of this country. And that is why this suspension of standing orders should be allowed. This suspension of standing orders should be allowed because what we will see from those opposite is them oppose it, but we'll see a majority support this suspension. It mightn't be an absolute majority. I suspect it won't be, because we've been very generous with our pairing arrangements on this side of the House. But there will be a majority. But those opposite who came in here at 10 o'clock and moved their typical suspension of standing orders, we didn't have points of order in the Leader of the Opposition when he spoke, unlike my motion for suspending standing orders here. We let him have his say, and we thought we'll get the little games out of the way by 10:25. Get them out of the way. But what did we see then? We saw twice today votes and debates on the amendments being considered immediately. So what if they had their way? We would have brought the House back today to consider the amendments that were carried on Friday night, and the House wouldn't have even considered them. We would have gone home, come back another day. They are out of control in their destructiveness. Out of control. They debated it for hour after hour, and then what happened was their backbench got restless, and they started to say to the Chief Opposition Whip, "What are we doing here?" And they went home. They voted with their feet. And the fact is, we had an arrangement in writing last Thursday night about pairing arrangements, and it was reneged on Friday. It was reneged on Friday by those opposite because they don't want to engage in the substance of it.
The Leader of the House resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, loath as I am to interrupt the Leader of the House, he is trying to cover the embarrassment of his reneging on the pairing arrangement this afternoon with this fig leaf of a discussion.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The Leader of the House.
the suspension should be agreed to, and the resolution should be voted
Order.
on and supported if they are at
The
all
minister's
fair income
time
in their
has
rhetoric on this issue.
expired. The question is that the suspension of standing and sessional orders be agreed to. The member for Wentworth.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. We have just had in the debate previous to this the best part of an hour discussing the issue and debating the issue of uniform national pricing. And so there has been plenty of debate and plenty of opportunity for the government to deal with this. This motion before the House is completely inappropriate, and I'll come to its wording and its inappropriateness in a moment. But it's important to understand, Mr Speaker, its political genesis, how it came about, because the member for Cowper had an amendment to the NBN Access Bill which would have provided in clear statutory language the obligation on the NBN to charge the same price for broadband in megabits per second, whether it was delivered on fibre in the city or on wireless in the bush or on satellite in the more remote areas. And the country independents initially were very attracted to that. And indeed we made some changes to the language of the amendment to suit the request of one of the country independents, who was very enthusiastic about it. But then, as the debate was getting dragged on by speaker after speaker from the government, we realised that, locked in a tender embrace with the Minister for Communications, Senator Conroy, were our friends on the crossbenches. And they emerged with a sense of achievement because they had got an undertaking from the government to give a community impact statement on all future policy decisions on technology. Well, that is hardly an achievement. It's no substitute for statutory language. But that's the deal they've done. They gave up a very clear amendment which would have given their constituents a very clear guarantee that could not be taken away by any government. It would need a vote of both houses of parliament to take it away. They gave in for these warm words from the government. But now, having done that and having debated that for over an hour, we now have the farce of this so-called motion. This motion asks the House to note that a community impact statement will be prepared on all future policy decisions on technology. Well, for our part, we don't know whether the government will do that or not. We're not going to give any imprimatur or approval to a statement of intention. The government's broken more promises than they've had hot dinners. They're always promising things and they're not promising them and breaking their promises. They also want the House to note that the government is committed to uniform wholesale national pricing within technologies. Well, how on earth can the opposition vote for that? We can't say that we agree or note or endorse in any way what the government's statement of intention is. The fact that they voted down our amendment, the member for Cowper's amendment, suggests that they're not committed to uniform wholesale national pricing at all. They want us to note that there will be a universal price for all customers receiving optic fibre, a universal price for all customers receiving fixed wireless, and a universal price for all customers receiving satellite. Well, it's fine for the government to state that as its intention. They can put it on the NBN website if they like. But why should the opposition, who does not believe the government when it says it's committed to fairness for the regions, why do they expect us to endorse that? And then finally, they've asked the House in this urgent motion to note that the NBN has achieved uniform national entry-level pricing across technologies. It hasn't achieved anything. It hasn't even started operating. At this stage, it's got many times more employees than it actually has customers. It's an extraordinary organisation. Mr Speaker, this is a presumptuous, it's an impertinent resolution. We are not going to dignify the government's deal with the country independents. If they want to substitute warm words, not that warm words, lukewarm words, for real statutory language that would protect the rights of their constituents as we sought to do, that's their problem. They can live with that. But we are not going to give special leave for this absurd motion, and if by some miracle of arithmetic, and I don't expect a miracle on that score, special leave were to be granted, we would certainly vote against the resolution.
The member for New England.
Mr Speaker, in an earlier debate today, I think we saw the height of hypocrisy, and regrettably, a man I regard with some esteem, the member for Wentworth, has just added to that hypocrisy. What we've actually seen today is the introduction of amendments from the Senate and one amendment from the member for Cowper. The opposition proposed an amendment to add cost to something that they've argued for many years has been too costly. They've actually proposed something that will actually add cost to it. They've proposed an amendment and then voted against the bill. When asked on a number of occasions, would the National Party, would the member for Cowper support, if we supported the amendment, would he support the bill? He said no. So, and now the member for Wentworth is carrying on in the same vein. That amendment that the member for Cowper put before the House not only demonstrates that they don't really care what's happening in regional Australia, but they're totally dominated by the city-based majority in the Liberal Party. Totally dominated. How could these my esteemed friends here, one who's having a birthday today, how could they argue against something that's going to remove distance as being a disadvantage for people who live in the country? How can you argue against this piece of infrastructure, the very piece of infrastructure that is going to be more important than railway lines and roads in relation to where people live in this nation? We've had this argument constantly, and members of the National Party raise it from time to time, that country Australia has missed out. Here's an opportunity. Here's an enormous opportunity for country Australia to be in front of the game. And I'm proud to say that the rollout that's occurring as we speak in Armidale, in my electorate, is very successful. Nearly 90% of acceptance from the people who have been involved. An extraordinary outcome. And some of the potential for this particular piece of infrastructure, it hasn't been invented yet. And here we are arguing over cost. Some of the uses of this potential technology haven't been invented, but they will. They will be invented. Now, the member for Wentworth talked about legislation. Everything has to be encapsulated in legislation, so they're opposing the statement of the House. I remember very well when Senator Joyce and the then President of the National Farmers Federation, Peter Corish, did a deal with the former Prime Minister, John Howard, that the equity of access to broadband and telephone services was actually going to be enshrined in legislation. It would be in the bill. What happened to that? Maybe the member for Wentworth would like to talk about the hypocrisy that's there. There's been a number of discussions today about whether people are in favour of various things. Between 80 and 90% of country Australians didn't want Telstra sold. Through this mechanism that the government is putting up and that we're supporting is an opportunity for country Australians to involve themselves in the future. And for the member for Wentworth and other country members, or Malcolm's not a country member, of course, but for other country members to actually oppose this statement of the House that actually enshrines some of the very things that they had in their own amendment and then voted against the bill, the absurd hypocrisy in relation to the way in which this debate has been handled today. And then at the end of the debate that they've said it's so very important and demanded that the country independents support their amendment, and most of their people aren't even in the building. Most of their people aren't in the building. The 44 in the building. How can they expect to draw out a debate where the country independents and the city independents determine a decision in their favour when they haven't even got their numbers in the House? And I think that just demonstrates the absolute height of hypocrisy in relation to what is probably the most significant issue that country Australians will see this parliament debate.
Order. The question is that this House agree to the suspension of standing orders by the Leader of the House, the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in the dying days of this debate today, it needs to be put on the record that what has happened is that the Leader of the House has walked in here tonight and moved a motion to today's debate because he didn't want to move an amendment. He didn't want to move an amendment to the bill, which is what should have happened and what the opposition proposed, because they didn't want the bill to go back to the Senate. They wanted to actually truncate the debate of the parliament and to avoid the scrutiny of the House by not moving an amendment to the bill, which would have gone back to the Senate. They wanted to not vote for an opposition amendment to the bill, which the independents had indicated early today they would support, because they did not want the bill to go back to the Senate. So instead they took the independents out into the members' lobby and they made sure that they offered them whatever inducements were required.
The member for Sturt will resume his place. The member for Sturt will resume his place. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker. Reflection on members.
Order. I will listen.
And motives.
Order. I will listen carefully to the statements made by the member for Sturt. He knows the requirements of the House, and anybody else that's aggrieved knows the other avenues that are available. The member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So not only did the independents indicate to us that they would support an amendment moved by the opposition that dealt with this issue, they were then...
The member for Sturt. The member for Sturt will resume his place. Order. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Firstly, Mr Speaker, I'd ask that he withdraw that comment.
Order. It would assist if the comment, as I was trying to sit the member for Sturt down, be withdrawn. The member for Sturt.
Mr Speaker, I withdraw the comment.
Order.
Mr Speaker.
The member for Sturt will resume his seat.
Mr Speaker,
the member for Sturt will resume his seat. The member for Sturt will resume his seat. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker, it goes to relevance. The member for Sturt earlier on made the point that this was a debate about the suspension of standing orders.
The Leader of the House will resume his seat. The Leader of the House will resume his seat. The Leader of the House will resume his seat. And fortunately for the member for Sturt, I indicated that I would allow a free-ranging debate, but remind the member for Sturt of the need to be relevant in some ways about the motion. The member for Sturt.
And the reason why this suspension of standing orders should not be carried is because the opposition is not going to be part of a political fix, a fix that the government has fitted up with the crossbenchers to avoid supporting an opposition amendment which would have done much more to protect country Australia than this deal that the government has done with the independents in today's debate. And you can move all the points of order you like. The truth is out there already and on the record.
The member for Sturt will resume his seat. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Because someone else is out there, and it's not the truth.
Order.
The fact is that
the
manager of opposition business is not addressing the question that is before the House.
The Leader of the House will resume his seat. The Leader of the House will resume his seat. I indicate to the member for Sturt that he's fortunate that I was lenient when he raised a point of order, but I would invite him to address the question, and I will listen carefully to what he's saying. The member for Sturt.
Mr Speaker, the question is that the House suspend the standing orders in order for this motion to be debated. This motion is a political fix that the government has come up with this afternoon in order to get the independents not to amend the bill by supporting the opposition's amendment and therefore require the bill not to go back to the Senate. That is why what I'm saying is relevant to the suspension, because the motion was part of the agreement they made with the independents in order to buy their support with this grubby deal, that the government has made with the crossbenchers.
Resume his seat. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker, I ask that he withdraw.
Order. Order. I have listened. Order. The member for Lyne. I have listened carefully to terms that up until this point the member for Sturt has used, and whilst they have been robust, I think that that was one term too far, because it might be construed in the wrong way, that it was in order. The member for McCullough, usually the explanation that's given is that you add the word politically something to all those things that are said. It is very difficult for the expression to imagine that the expression used might be interpreted that way. So I just invite the member for Sturt to withdraw.
I withdraw, Mr Speaker. New South Wales Labor might be out of government in New South Wales, but they're here and alive.
When the member for Sturt will resume his seat, and he knows that when he comes to the dispatch box, he comes for the single purpose not to continue the debate. The time allotted for the debate has expired, being only 25 minutes. The question is that the motion moved by the Leader of the House for the suspension of standing and sessional orders be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. A division required? Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Order. Lock the doors. The question is the motion moved by the Leader of the House for the suspension of standing and sessional orders be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Shortland and Fowler tellers for the ayes, and the members for Parkes and Barker tellers for the noes. Order. Well, the result of the division is ayes 58, noes 37. The question is therefore not supported by an absolute majority as required by Standing Order 47.